By the time I turned 7, I had already learned how to be invisible. Not in a tragic, storybook kind of way, but in the quiet, exhausting, real-world way that comes from being the child no one asks about. When you grow up in a house full of voices, but none of them call your name unless it's to ask where the remote is or if you've taken out the trash, you start to shrink. Not physically, but emotionally. Like you're folding yourself smaller to fit into the margins of your own life. My name is Naomi Ellis, and in my family, I was background noise. I was born 2 years after Caleb, the golden boy, the one who could charm relatives with a single glance, who recited the alphabet at 18 months and got standing ovations for burping the national anthem. If there was a camera, he was in front of it. If there was a prize, he was winning it. If there was praise to be handed out, he collected every ounce of it like it was oxygen, and he couldn't breathe without more. To outsiders, we were the perfect middle-class family in Sacramento. A 2-story house with blue shutters, a backyard with a leaning swing set, and a minivan that always had something from the PTA in the trunk. But inside, things were different. Love wasn't spread evenly. It was doled out in measured portions, and Caleb got the lion's share. I don't blame him for being brilliant. I blame the system we grew up in, the unspoken hierarchy where love was a spotlight, and I was standing somewhere in the wings. He didn't ask to be the favorite, and I didn't ask to be forgotten. But here we were, in the same house, living 2 very different lives. In school, I was a solid B student. I liked library books and building tiny towns out of cereal boxes. I never got sent to the principal's office. I never lost my backpack. I just existed, quietly, neatly, out of the way. Teachers described me as well-behaved or sweet but reserved. I learned early on that drawing too much attention only led to disappointment. So I stopped trying. Our house was loud. Mom's voice carried from room to room, always tinged with urgency, lost keys, missed appointments, bills due. Dad was quieter but not softer. He came home late, collapsed on the couch, and kept the TV remote closer than his children. They were busy people, tired people, but never too tired to cheer at Caleb's soccer games or to bake cupcakes for his science fairs. My birthdays were polite affairs. Store-bought cupcakes for my 2nd grade class. A single gift bag from the clearance section. Meanwhile, Caleb got scavenger hunts with personalized clues and entire yard decorated themes. One year, they rented a pony. For me, I got a happy birthday text from Dad during his lunch break. I remember staring at it, not even sure he'd remembered to send it himself. By the time I was 10, I had stopped asking for anything extravagant. Not because I didn't want it, but because the disappointment of seeing their distracted eyes dart around the room, searching for excuses, hurt more than not having. You learn to protect your own heart, even from the people you love. Aunt Lydia was the exception. She was Mom's younger sister, only 10 years older than me, and light years different. She wore her hair short, dyed copper red, and never once forgot a birthday. She lived in San Jose back then and mailed me handwritten letters with pressed flower petals tucked into the envelope. When I turned 11, she sent me a set of watercolor paints and a tiny sketchbook. "Paint what you feel," she wrote, "even if it's just gray." I didn't realize until much later that she was the only adult in my life who saw me fully. She didn't look through me, she looked at me, and that made all the difference. At home, Caleb was the priority. He needed driving lessons? Done. He wanted new cleats for soccer? Bought. When he crashed Mom's car at 16, there was yelling, but by Monday, he had access to Dad's. When I asked for a new backpack because mine had a rip in the strap, I was told to sew it myself. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't dramatic. It was just inequality dripping slowly over years until it soaked into my bones. A quiet, daily erosion. One time when I was 12, Caleb got sick. Nothing serious, just a stomach bug. But the entire household revolved around his nausea. Thermometers, soup, canceled plans, whispered voices in the hallway. The same week, I got my first period. I cried in the bathroom for an hour with no idea what was happening. No one noticed. It's strange how that shaped me, not just the moment but the pattern. I learned to Google everything, to plan ahead, to be okay with being overlooked. I never resented Caleb, not really. I resented the vacuum he created, the way his existence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. I didn't resent Caleb, not yet. I admired him in a distant, painful kind of way, like a kid watching fireworks from behind a glass wall. When high school came around, I got a part-time job shelving books at the public library. I didn't tell my parents at first. I didn't need their permission. They barely noticed my schedule anyway. But it gave me a taste of something I hadn't had before, autonomy, my own little sliver of control. With the money I earned, I bought myself real notebooks, second-hand jeans, a decent pair of headphones. I started journaling, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote about the quiet, about the ache of invisibility, about the moments when someone actually said my name and meant it. When I got accepted to Northern State University, I cried in the library break room. No one was there to see it. And when I told my parents at dinner that night, they barely looked up from their phones. "That's nice," Dad said. "Is it far?" "About 4 hours north." Mom blinked. Do they have scholarships?" I nodded. "I got a partial one. I'll need to work, but it covers about half." They didn't ask for details. Didn't ask what I planned to study. Didn't ask when I'd be moving. Aunt Lydia called the next day. She had already heard the news, probably from Facebook, and was beaming through the phone. "Naomi, this is huge. I'm so proud of you. When you get there, send me your address, okay? I'll help cover groceries and rent. I mean it. Monthly." I don't think I've ever felt more seen. I held onto that promise like a life raft. Because deep down, even then, I knew, if I was going to make it, I couldn't count on the people under my own roof. But I still had hope. And a suitcase. And a train ticket printed on thin blue paper. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was headed somewhere that belonged to me. The train ride to Northern State felt like more than a change of scenery. It felt like an unspoken contract with myself. I was starting over. Clean slate. New city. New name, even if I wanted. Not legally, of course, but metaphorically. The Naomi who boarded that train in Sacramento was tired, starved for affirmation. The one who stepped off 2 hours later was determined. My dorm was small, but it was mine. Shared with a girl named June, who arrived with too many plants and a Bluetooth speaker that played lo-fi jazz at all hours. I liked her instantly. She offered me half of her blueberry muffin the first morning and didn't ask questions when I said I wasn't hungry, even though I was. I unpacked slowly. Stacked my sketchbooks on the shelf. Lined the top drawer with the only nice stationery I owned. Hung Aunt Lydia's note above my desk like a banner. "You've already made me proud. Let me help you keep going." I texted her that same evening, "Here safely. Room's nice. You were right, it smells like pine needles." She replied within minutes, "Send your bank details when you can. $2,000 a month for rent, food, and a bit of joy." I cried reading that, not because of the money, but because of the words, "a bit of joy." No one had ever built that into their plans for me. I sent the details the next day, then I waited. Week 1, nothing. Week 2, still nothing. At first, I blamed the bank, then school processing. Maybe Lydia got the wrong account. I waited 3 weeks before calling Mom, hoping to keep it light. "Hey, did Lydia say anything to you about money for school?" Silence on the line, then, "Excuse me." She mentioned helping me with living expenses. I just haven't seen anything come through. Mom's voice sharpened. "Naomi, how could you be so selfish? Your aunt is going through a divorce. You know how complicated that is." She told me herself. She was probably just being nice. Stop expecting handouts and grow up. Get a job like everyone else. Click, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief. It felt like betrayal, but worse, like gaslighting. As if I had imagined the whole thing, but I knew Lydia. She didn't make empty promises, and I had her message, still saved on my phone. I didn't call her. I didn't want to cause drama. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe Lydia had changed her mind. So I got a job, a small cafe on the edge of campus with chipped mugs and overpriced croissants. I worked the morning shift, 6 a.m. to 11 before running straight to class. I lied during the interview, said I had barista experience. I didn't, but I learned fast. My hands burned from steam wands. My knees ached from standing on rubber mats. But the tips helped. I survived on leftover muffins and half-priced sandwiches after close. Sometimes June shared her groceries. She never made me feel guilty. Just split her ramen into 2 bowls and asked about my day. After 2 weeks, I picked up a second job, freelance content writing. 10 cents a word for SEO blogs on topics like the 7 best dog breeds for apartment living and why your toothbrush matters more than you think. I didn't sleep much. Weekends blurred. I forgot birthdays, skipped club fairs. I barely made it to study group. My GPA dipped, but not disastrously. I convinced myself it was normal, college is hard, everyone's struggling, right? But I couldn't shake the question, what happened to Lydia's promise? When my laptop died one morning, screen black, no signs of life, I sat in the library and cried. I didn't even try to hide it. I needed that laptop for school. For work, for sanity. June found me 2 hours later and wordlessly handed me a cup of tea. Then she said, "My parents can spot you some money, just until you get through midterms." I protested. She insisted. She Venmo'd me $500 that night. I logged it in a notebook, every cent, every promise. I would pay her back. I had to. I still hadn't heard from Lydia. And now I didn't dare ask. Because if Mom had lied about that, what else was she hiding? Hunger isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual. And when all 3 stack up, the silence inside you starts to hum. By mid-October, I was down 12 pounds from my already slim frame. My cheeks were hollow, my clothes hung a little looser, and I moved through campus like a ghost, trying not to bump into the living. The cafe job was steady, but minimum wage didn't stretch far in a college town where rent swallowed half of every paycheck. I rationed every dollar, oatmeal for breakfast, discount soup for dinner. I stopped buying shampoo and started watering it down to make it last. I learned the art of pretending to be full when June cooked and offered to share. But the worst part wasn't the hunger pangs. It was pretending I was fine. I smiled through classes, submitted assignments just before midnight, showed up to the cafe even when my legs ached and my head buzzed from lack of sleep. I didn't have time to be sick. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. One Tuesday, the cafe closed unexpectedly for maintenance. A plumbing issue. Back open Friday, the manager said with a shrug. 3 days without income. 3 days without employee meals. I had 2 granola bars in my drawer and exactly $3.12 in my checking account. By Thursday night, I was dizzy walking to class. The world tilted slightly every time I turned my head. My vision blurred at the edges like an old photograph. Still, I showed up to my psych seminar, sat in the back, took notes I couldn't read later. After class, I remember standing in the hallway, then darkness. When I woke up, I was on a bench outside the building. June hovered beside me, a vending machine granola bar in one hand, her phone in the other. "Naomi, hey," you fainted. I blinked, confused. "What?" "Your professor said you stumbled out. Someone caught you. You scared me." I sat up slowly, my stomach twisted not from food but from shame. "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not." She handed me the granola bar. I took it with trembling fingers. I didn't even taste it. Just felt it hit my stomach like a small lifeline. Later that night, June pulled her blanket over my shivering body and whispered, "Naomi, this isn't normal. You can't keep doing this." I stared at the ceiling. "I'm trying." "I know, but you shouldn't have to try this hard just to survive." That sentence stayed with me because I had normalized it. The hunger, the exhaustion, the quiet panic of checking my account balance and seeing single digits. I thought it was just how things were, that if I worked hard enough, I'd earn stability. That struggling was a rite of passage, but it was theft. Someone had stolen what was promised to me. I didn't know how or why, but I knew this. I was not supposed to be starving. Not when I had a relative who had sworn to help. Not when Aunt Lydia had said she'd send support every month. I scrolled back through her messages. There it was. "Send your bank info when you can." And I had trusted. So where had the money gone? I didn't have answers yet. But a seed of suspicion had been planted. One that would eventually bloom into something much more powerful than survival. But for now, I lay in bed, stomach hollow but heart-stirring. The silence was no longer just hunger. It was awakening. While I scraped together coins for instant noodles and fell asleep with my laptop balanced on my stomach, my parents sent me updates about Caleb. "Your brother's doing great," Mom texted one Sunday. "He's deep into midterms." "So proud." "He's in a tough program," Dad added. "Pre-law, very competitive." The messages were always short, glowing, and one-directional. They never asked how I was doing, just tiny postcards from Caleb's imagined success. Except something didn't feel right. He never called, never responded to my texts, not even with his signature thumbs-up emoji. When I asked Mom for his address to send a birthday card, she said, "Oh, he's moved campuses temporarily for a study abroad thing." That struck me as strange. Study abroad? We'd barely had money for groceries when I left for college. How could they afford that? Then again, they hadn't sent me a care package. Not once. Maybe they'd chosen to pour it all into Caleb. It wouldn't be the first time. Caleb had always been the family's shining star. When he got a B+ in 6th grade science, they framed the test. When I got straight A's in 9th grade, they said, "Good, that's what we expect from you." At 15, he totaled Mom's Toyota after a party. "Boys will be boys," Dad said, holding an ice pack to Caleb's bruised hand. I once broke a plate and was grounded for a week. I remember a family dinner the year before I left. Caleb announced he wanted to go into law. Dad raised a glass. "A future attorney? That's my boy." I murmured that I was considering psychology. Mom nodded without looking up. "Makes sense, you've always been sensitive." I didn't correct her. I'd said sociology. So when the updates kept coming about Caleb's amazing GPA, his packed schedule, his important internships, I tried to believe them. But something in me had changed. Maybe it was the hunger, or the exhaustion, or the realization that I was no longer a child hoping for fairness. I was growing up, fast, and I was beginning to see the cracks. One night, unable to sleep, I searched for Caleb online. Nothing came up under his name on the college website my parents said he attended. No student directory listing, no dean's list, no club photos, no academic mentions. I typed his name into Facebook. His profile hadn't updated in over a year. Last public post, a blurry photo of a poker night with high school friends. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen lighting my face, and a sick feeling rising in my gut. Something wasn't adding up. The next day I called Dad. "Hey," I said, "random question, what's Caleb's major again?" Pause, economics, why? Didn't Mom say pre-law last week? Longer pause, yeah, well, same department. It was. I ended the call early, my hands clammy, my mind buzzing. Why would they lie? What were they hiding? And why did I feel like the only one left out of the truth? The answer would come sooner than I expected. Served cold, in front of a room full of relatives, and wrapped in a question I never saw coming. But for now, I returned to work. Returned to silence. Returned to the hollow ache of knowing that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be their golden child. Because that role had already been cast, even if the actor had long left the stage. The invitation came on thick cream cardstock with gold foil letters. Aunt Lydia never did anything halfway. Family brunch to celebrate my return. Sunday at noon, dress nice. Bring your appetites and your honesty. That last line felt like a wink. I didn't think much of it then. I hadn't seen most of my extended family in over a year. The idea of dressing up, smiling politely, and pretending everything was fine made my stomach knot. But Lydia was the reason I hadn't fallen apart. I owed her more than a visit, I owed her my presence. So I went. Her new house sat nestled on a quiet cul-de-sac in Palo Alto. Modern, warm, filled with glass and light. The backyard opened to a patio strung with fairy lights, and the smell of rosemary and roasted vegetables drifted from the kitchen. Everyone was already there when I arrived. Mom wore her classic pressed blouse. Dad had his "I'm a charming guest" voice on. My cousins filled the chairs. The only person missing was Caleb. "Where's your brother?" someone asked. "Midterms," Dad said smoothly. "He's swamped, sends his love." I found a seat near the end of the table, beside my younger cousin Mia, who was too busy on her phone to notice my awkward smile. The brunch was beautiful. Poached salmon, herb potatoes, citrus salad. It was more food than I'd seen on a single table in months. My stomach grumbled, but I kept my posture straight. Everyone took turns toasting Lydia's return from her humanitarian trip to India. There were jokes about jet lag, praise for her generosity, compliments about the house. And then, somewhere between the mimosas and the dessert tray, it happened. Lydia looked directly at me, smiled gently. "Naomi, sweetheart," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is the $2,000 I send you each month still enough? Or should we bump it up for textbooks?" A fork clattered onto a plate. I blinked. What?" I said. She tilted her head. "The transfer, to your account. I've been sending it every month since last fall." The air went still. My voice came out like a whisper. "I never got it." Silence rippled through the table. All eyes moved from me to my parents. Lydia's face changed, still calm but sharp. "Robert, Elizabeth," she said, her voice precise. "Would you care to explain?" Mom's lips trembled. "Lydia, this isn't the time or place." "No," Lydia said, setting down her napkin. "It is exactly the time. What did you do with Naomi's money?" My father cleared his throat. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it," she replied. He looked at his plate. "Caleb, he's been struggling, addiction, gambling. It started in high school. We thought we could manage it quietly. But things got worse. Debts, bad friends, clinics. We needed the money." Lydia's voice went cold. "So you took it from Naomi." "She's strong," Mom said quietly. "She always figures it out." A wave of heat rushed through my body. I felt both sick and numb. Lydia pushed back her chair. "Everyone, please enjoy the rest of brunch. Robert, Elizabeth, my study now." My parents rose without argument, heads bowed like children sent to the principal. The moment the door clicked shut, the room buzzed with forced conversation. No one looked at me. My cousin Mia offered me a cookie and a small, guilty shrug. I sat there, food untouched, heartbeat roaring in my ears. 15 minutes later, the study door opened. My parents exited first, Mom blotting her tears, Dad pale and hollow. They left without a word. Lydia returned like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Well," she said lightly, clapping her hands once. "Who wants coffee?" No one answered. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. And the truth wasn't buried anymore. The house was quiet once the guests had gone. Plates stacked, candles flickering low, the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic still lingering in the air like the aftershock of a storm. I stood in the hallway, unsure if I was allowed to move. Lydia found me there, still half paralyzed beside the coat rack. "Naomi," she said gently, "come sit with me." We returned to the same study where my parents had been summoned like schoolchildren. She poured us both a cup of tea, peppermint, no sugar, and sat across from me in a leather armchair. "I'm sorry you had to find out that way," she said. I shook my head. "I'm not." Lydia studied me for a long moment. "You've always been quiet, but I never thought you were weak." "I'm not," I said, and I believed it, maybe for the first time. She nodded once, then reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a thin folder. "This is a record of every payment I made to your parents. I started it when you got your acceptance letter. I didn't want to deal with bank logins or apps. I figured your mom could manage the transfers on my behalf." She placed the pages in front of me, neatly typed logs, amounts, dates, notes for Naomi's rent, for Naomi's textbooks, for Naomi's groceries. Every month, like clockwork, tears stung the back of my eyes. "They said you were having money problems," I whispered. "They said I was selfish to even ask." Lydia's mouth tightened. "They lied." She took a breath. "There's more." I sat up straighter. "They told me Caleb had gotten into a good program in San Francisco. They said he needed a reset, new friends, new environment. I gave them an extra $20,000 up front for his first semester." I blinked. "Caleb's not in school, is he?" "No, he never was. I did some digging after today. Hired someone. He's been gambling online, lost tens of thousands. They've been paying his debts with your money. It wasn't shock I felt, it was confirmation. My instincts had been right. The dots had never connected, and now I knew why. How much total? I asked. Lydia looked me straight in the eyes. Just under $80,000. I exhaled sharply, as if the air had been punched from my lungs. All that time I was skipping meals, working double shifts, I trailed off. I know, she said, reaching across the table. And I'm so sorry, I should have asked you directly. I trusted them because they were family. So did I murmured. We sat in silence, not uncomfortable, just full of truth. I've changed my will, Lydia said eventually. You are now my sole heir. I've already told your parents. They weren't happy. I don't want money, I said reflexively. It's not about want, she replied. It's about what's right. I trust you to use it well, to live well. A pause, then she added, and from now on the money comes to you. Direct deposit, no middlemen. Something inside me softened, then reformed, like scar tissue turning into strength. Thank you, I said, not just for the money, for seeing me, for believing me. Lydia smiled gently. You've already paid the price of silence. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. That night, I slept in her guest room beneath a weighted blanket, wrapped in the strange peace of finally being heard. And in the morning, the sun came in through the window like a quiet promise. Everything had changed, and for once, it was changing for me. I returned to campus the following Monday with a full fridge, a repaired laptop, and the quiet knowledge that I no longer had to pretend I was okay. The first thing I did was quit the freelance writing job. I kept the cafe gig for weekends. I actually enjoyed it when I wasn't relying on it to eat. Suddenly, pouring cappuccinos and chatting with regulars felt like a luxury instead of a lifeline. I bought a proper winter coat, replaced my worn-out shoes, took June out to dinner and paid back every dollar she had lent me. You didn't have to, she said when I handed her the envelope. I know, I said. That's why I wanted to. My grades improved. With rest came clarity. I wasn't always tired anymore. I could focus, retain information, even enjoy learning again. One of my professors pulled me aside after class and said, "You've come alive this semester. Don't lose this momentum." I didn't plan to. Lydia and I spoke every Sunday. Sometimes about logistics, money, school, bills, but more often about little things. Her garden, my favorite class, a book she thought I'd love. You sound lighter, she said one morning. I feel it, I admitted. I didn't tell my parents I'd come back to school. I didn't respond to their texts. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But I didn't need their permission to move forward. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like I had a future. I wasn't just surviving, I was shaping it. I joined a study group for behavioral psych, applied for a campus research assistant role, said yes when June invited me to trivia night. Little by little, I stitched a life together, one built on truth, on support, on my own terms. And slowly, the girl who had once rationed toothpaste and cried into vending machine dinners began to dissolve. In her place stood someone new, quiet, yes, but solid. No longer invisible, no longer waiting for someone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. They showed up on a Wednesday. I had just finished my shift at the cafe and was walking back to the dorm, earbuds in, head clear. Life had settled into a rhythm, gentle, honest mine. I wasn't expecting anything to break that calm until I saw them. My parents, sitting on the stone bench outside my dorm like ghosts from a dream I'd outgrown. Mom wore a cardigan I hadn't seen since high school. Dad's hair looked grayer and his eyes were ringed with fatigue. Naomi, Mom said, standing quickly. We need to talk. I didn't say anything. June passed by, gave me a questioning look. I nodded once and she kept walking. We went upstairs. Inside my room, the air felt thinner. They sat, Dad on my desk chair, Mom on the edge of June's bed. I stayed by the door. We heard from Lydia, Dad began, about the will. I said nothing. She's giving everything to you, Mom added. Do you understand what that means? I crossed my arms. I understand perfectly. Mom's face twisted. We just think it's unfair. She's your aunt, we're her family too. You stole from me, I said evenly, for 2 years. It wasn't like that, Dad said quickly. We were trying to save your brother. By starving your daughter. Silence, Mom leaned forward. Naomi, please, just talk to Lydia. Tell her we're a family, that we can figure this out. No, you don't mean that, she said, eyes wet. You're just hurt. I meant every word, I said, and I'm not hurt, I'm done. They stared at me, both unraveling in different ways. Mom teary and trembling, Dad quiet, ashamed. She's already given you over $100,000, I said, and you used it all on someone who won't even show up. He's sick, Mom whispered, and you let that sickness destroy me. My voice cracked, my body didn't. I had to beg friends for food. I passed out in class. I worked 2 jobs and skipped meals, all while you sent me photos of Caleb's success. They didn't argue, they couldn't. Get out, I said. Naomi, we're your parents, Mom cried. And you made your choice, I replied. Now live with it. They left in silence. When the door closed, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. Not angry, not even sad, just free. That was the day I finally stopped waiting for an apology and started living like I didn't need one. The call came late. It was a Tuesday night, and I was reviewing notes for a quiz when my phone lit up with an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Hello. A pause then, Naomi. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that voice in nearly a year. It's Caleb. I said nothing, let the silence speak. I'm at a facility in Arizona. Rehab intensive program. Part of the recovery process is making amends. Another pause, a deeper breath. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. He didn't stammer, didn't dodge. I didn't know what they were doing with your money. I didn't know you were struggling, but I do now, and I'm sorry for my part in it. Still, I said nothing. My fingers clenched the phone, knuckles white. You don't have to say anything, he added. I just needed to own it. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rehearsed. It felt real. After a long moment, I exhaled. Thank you for saying that. He sounded surprised. You mean it? I do. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I don't deserve that yet. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. No, you don't. But I hope maybe one day. Maybe. We hung up without promises, without reunion. I sat there for a long time, phone in my lap, wondering what redemption really looked like. Could people change? Could patterns break? Or did they always repeat? I didn't know. But I knew this. I wasn't the same girl who watched her brother get everything. I wasn't in his shadow anymore. And whether he rose or fell again, it wouldn't change who I had become. Somewhere deep inside, I wished him well. But I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for him, not for them. My life had already started without their permission. And I wasn't looking back. The seasons changed without ceremony. Leaves crisped. Snow hinted. Time passed, and I did not break. Instead, I built. Slowly. Intentionally. Like someone stitching their own skin back together with steady hands. I got the research assistant position. My professors took notice. One of them recommended me for a summer grant, and for the first time, I said yes without wondering how I'd afford the bus ride to the interview. I ate 3 meals a day, slept 7 hours a night, laughed with June during Sunday laundry marathons. I went on walks just because. I read books not assigned by any syllabus. I lived. Not the dramatic kind of living that fills Instagram stories. The quiet kind. The kind you earn. I visited Lydia over spring break. We made lentil soup and watched documentaries. She asked about my classes and my dreams and never once asked about Mom or Dad. I told her about the phone call from Caleb. She nodded once and said, some people break their cycles, some don't, but you already have. When I returned to campus, there was a letter waiting for me. No return address. My mother's handwriting. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because here's the truth. Closure doesn't always come in the form of apologies. Sometimes it comes in the shape of peace. In the steady breath you take when no one's watching. In the mirror when you see yourself clearly and smile. I used to believe I had to earn love. That if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, someone would finally choose me. But now I know. I was never meant to wait. I was meant to choose myself. And I did. This is my life, my rhythm, my healing, on my terms. And for the first time ever, that is more than enough.